Yeah, sure, most definitely. Right,
Superb.
I'll start from perhaps secondary school. I actually finished school with one GCSE. You're probably thinking, how did that happen? So I remember being in year 9 and just being quite distracted, being part of the wrong crowd. You know, parents are in your ear, you're not really listening, uncles and aunties are in your ear. And at that point, it really doesn't occur to you that you're at a pivotal point in your academic life. It's GCSE time. And I didn't take it seriously. I hardly revised. I think I got an A star and it was in religious studies. I really enjoyed religious studies, and it was because I came from a religious background. My parents were Christians, so I felt like, oh, that was the sort of subject that I felt very confident in knowing, because, and I really was interested in other people's beliefs. I loved history. I loved dance, so I went to performing arts school, and I just got to a place where without having focus, and perhaps maybe my parents weren't my main source of inspiration for children like me per se, it was easy to kind of come off the rails, or you slightly derail. I eventually did go to college and I studied childcare, and I had zero interest. I think 6 months into my BTEC, I was like, I really don't want to do this. I think I did like a work placement at a nursery, and I'm 16 and I'm running after little kids, and I'm just like, this is not what I really want to do. This is like really hard work. You need patience. And considering that how I was at the age of 16, I didn't have those qualities to be able to have the patience to perhaps nurture other people's children and just have fun with it. And I realized that this is not what I really want to do. I eventually dropped out. And at that point, my parents they were not happy at all, because education is a very big achievement in our family. And, the Black community, especially African community, is all about education, education, education. So my mum was like, you have to find something to do. You can't just leave college and you're just unemployed. And at that stage, it occurred to me that I didn't have employability skills. And it's quite interesting because leaving secondary school, I don't think I was pretty much prepared to go into the workspace either. I did do a work experience. I did it at Revell at the time, the shoe store. I don't know if you remember Revell. But I enjoyed that. It was good. And I picked up some like customer service skills. But at that point, it didn't occur to me what it really meant to survive in the real world. And at that time, I had a friend, and he helped me put together a CV, and I just applied at McDonald's. I applied at McDonald's, I got the job. I was working at McDonald's full time. My parents were probably thinking, oh my gosh, how does our daughter that we gave birth to in Britain end up working in McDonald's? And for them, because they're immigrants from Africa, it's like, we understand if we're working in McDonald's because we didn't have much choice. But you've been given the opportunity to go to school here, to study, and you end up in McDonald's as your first job. I took it really seriously. Being a 16-year-old working in McDonald's, on a full-time basis, the money that's coming in, I'm like, oh, wow, this is really good. At that point, I didn't have to rely on my mom. I could buy my own things. So I began to become more independent. I matured more. And having that sort of real life, real world experience of dealing with people, especially in McDonald's. If you've worked in McDonald's, you can work pretty much anywhere because you're dealing with unhappy customers. It's almost like a humbling moment. You're on the fry station. As soon as you start, get on the fry station. And then from the fry station, they train you on the tills. And then I was on the drive-through for a bit as well. So it was a very humbling time for me. Being in McDonald's, I did early starts, so I had to get there, open up for 5 a.m. It was, breakfast time. So I would walk from my house, walk from my mum's all the way to our local McDonald's. So luckily it was about a 40-minute walk. So during that time, it may have looked like to my family, is her life is she ever gonna get anywhere? But it's during those moments that I was going through my own process of understanding perhaps life, and that, even though I'm not in education anymore, this is what people do. They get up, they go to work, they earn a living. they choose however they want to spend their money. But it's more about the nature of work that I was doing. I was also doing domestic cleaning, because that comes with the McDonald's role. You might get told to go and clean the toilets. So all of these sort of domestic lessons that perhaps my mum probably tried to get me to do at home and I just didn't want to do it, I was learning it at McDonald's. I had a few incidences where customers were not happy, and it's, it's a fast-paced environment. You're handling 4 or 5 orders at the same time. It was a very, fast-paced environment. I met quite a few people there, and it was an interesting, exciting place to be in. And I remember my dad walked in with my uncles, and they probably thought, oh, oh, why is our niece working in McDonald's? And at that point, I didn't feel ashamed. I just got on with my job, really. And I think my parents began to see that I had a great work ethic. I was always, I always arrived at work on time. I always did a great job. I've never received a disciplinary at all whatsoever. I knew how to count up my till at the end, print out my receipt. So I was learning certain skills. And going back to what I was saying before, at that point, it might have looked like I wasn't going anywhere, but I was going through a process that will later on help me in my life today, and how I deal with business or with an organization or with students. So fast forward, then I had my daughter at the age of 18, and I went back to college. My mum said, no, I felt, I know what I want to do now. I want to do business. So I think working in McDonald's almost turned my business hat on. I thought, what, I've enjoyed my experience in McDonald's, but that's not my end. That was just the beginning. And I've learned amazing customer service skills. And then I went back to college. I studied business and finance. It was a BTEC extended diploma. I did amazing in it. My teachers loved me. I enjoyed it. I loved the marketing unit. So I finally found something that was for me. I was able to be creative. I was able to set up my own business case study, did my own little branding. At the time, we were using Microsoft Office, so it was PowerPoint. So, you did what you have to do, your word art on Microsoft Word. And, I designed my documents however I wanted to design it. And at that point, I had a huge interest in fashion and just, the creative industry. It was time to apply for university. And yet again, coming from the family that I'm coming from, going to university is a huge achievement. I had no idea of other routes, perhaps maybe apprenticeships. I didn't really know much about it and so forth. So I applied to go to UCA and I studied fashion management and marketing. And that's when I would say my creative nature began to bud even more, because I've walked into an amazing institution that understood the business side of the creative industries. And I went in there learning creative skills, and I also went in there understanding the creative side of the business side of the creative industries. And on that degree, they almost, I think what we had to do was design our documents in InDesign. So we had workshops in InDesign, Illustrator, Photoshop, a lovely guy called Lawrence. It was part of our module. Every week we had workshops. And that's when I would say the consciousness of graphic design came in. And at that point we thought, well, we're studying fashion. Why on earth do we have to learn how to use Photoshop? But of course, we had to learn how to, we had to create certain CAD designs. Perhaps we're creating a project plan or like a promotional plan, and we have to perhaps design some form of matrix. We'd have to do that matrix in Illustrator, and then kind of input that into InDesign. So becoming familiar with these Adobe products and softwares, I began to see what I could do with it. I began to see what I could play around with. I was introduced into a mock-up website, so I started using a lot of mock-ups, and I taught myself how to use mock-ups. And I became really good at using mock-ups. My project was on Apple, so my major project was creating a kids line for Apple, so iPads for kids. And I found a whole load of iPad mock-ups, and I changed the colors of it. I created my own campaign. It was called the iKids New Generation campaign. I designed my documents so well. I just, you just get into it. I got into it so much. I didn't know I was good at it until I met with my course leader, and she said, you've designed your documents so well, like you're really good at graphic design, but we're just not sure if you're going to finish because you spent so much time designing your document. And finally, I felt like I had reached a point in my life where I'm good at something and I found what I'm good at. Perhaps it initially wasn't a graphic design degree, but I picked up some skills and I've kind of ran with it. I've, almost immersed myself in the skill. So of course I passed, I did well, I graduated eventually. Then I realized that I want to land a job that will allow me to use my graphic design skills that I picked up at university. So my first role, I went into digital marketing because my degree was in fashion management and marketing. And it was for Croydon College, and they allowed me to kind of design some adverts. It went into a newspaper. So I thought, oh, wow, my skills are that good. Well, for me at the time, I thought, oh, wow, okay, this is my first newspaper advert. And at the time, I still didn't have any form of, I would say, direction as to where I'm going. When you leave university, it can be quite daunting because it's like, okay, yeah, that's it. You're out there, go and find a job. But I think what would have helped me more was having a community that I could almost be part of. Everyone's in the same box, that we're looking for a job. And then there's these community leaders that are perhaps, they've been in the industry for years. They send in some useful information for you to help navigate the industry. But because I didn't have that, it took me much longer to really develop an understanding of how to break into the creative industries and within the graphic design discipline. I spent a lot of my time kind of going around in circles, from job to job. I did digital marketing. I went from digital marketing to then becoming a marketing assistant for a carpet company, doing their MailChimps and their mail outs. And at that point, I thought, I need some direction. I need to be in a place where there's room for me to grow, and I will develop my skill at the same time. So I ended up working as a admin assistant for a physiotherapy clinic, but I was still designing on the side because, of course, being a young mom, financial stability is very important for me. So whilst I was designing on the side, I came across a lady I met at an event. Actually, how I got to that event, I wasn't able to afford a ticket, but I said, hey, they needed a new logo. I said, I'll design your logo for free entry. So I designed their logo, and that was my entry into the event, which was great for me, really. So once I got into the event, there was a lady on the panel, and she was speaking about her experience, how she was in prison, she had her daughter in prison, and she came out with this amazing mentorship company. And at that point, it was so important for me to align myself with someone who has gone ahead of me and has experienced certain things, because it shows me that I can also come out great on the other side. So I connected with her, and she had a mentorship organization. And she said, hey, why don't you come on board and just, become my sole graphic designer? She didn't really care if I was good or bad. She just gave me the opportunity. And being a young designer in a small business, there's more room to make mistakes. I remember the first print design that I did for her, I forgot to remove the bleed. So that blue outline came out, once the printers delivered the work. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what is this blue outline? And I realized, oh my gosh, I forgot to remove the bleed. But normally, print rooms will actually email you and say you forgot to remove the bleed. So I'm surprised they didn't. But we used, I forgot their name. Maybe I should leave their name out. But yes, I can't remember the name, but it was an online print company. And the design was lovely, but it just had a blue border. It had that bright blue border. And she didn't shout at me. She wasn't like, oh my gosh, she ruined. It was a book launch. And her bookmarks had the bleed around. Postcards had the bleed around. And, having someone who could show me that level of mercy and allow me to make those rooms of mistakes was encouraging, because it showed me that I'm actually still learning, but next time at least I know to remove the bleed. I did a great piece of work, but I forgot to remove the bleed. So you know, I was with her for 3 years as her senior designer, helping her create various designs for different events. And I began to grow as a sole designer. Now, at that stage, I've not had any agency experience. I've not had any internship at a graphic design agent or a digital design agency. I was just part of a small business family, and I was just creating and designing and looking to other designers for sources of inspiration. Perhaps if there was like an amazing online platform for women, I'd go on their platform and have a look at how they design their flyers and use that as a source of inspiration. I didn't have a mentor within the creative industries. So 3 years on, I've built a huge portfolio of work just from working with this lady. And I was also part of a community group. So I designed their flyers also, and it allowed me to gain employment eventually in a digital agency. That was my first, agency role as a junior designer. And I was the only Black female in the agency. And my manager, who was very supportive. And at that point, I went from designing all my I went from designing in like Adobe to then being told, hey, you need to design some decks in PowerPoint. And I'm like, hold on, why am I designing in PowerPoint? Because at university, we were told that, hey, we're not going to use Microsoft product, we're going to use Adobe. So then I learned how to become an administrative designer because it has to work for the whole company. I have to be able to design a deck, and perhaps the sales team can also have access to it. So it's being able to, I would say, create transferable design. Can you design a beautiful deck that everybody else can use? At one point, I was just a deck designer. I'd had to design like 100-page decks, clean it up. Yeah, it was a very interesting experience. And then I had the opportunities of designing a few staples for Adobe, HSBC, Rolls-Royce. When the big brands started coming in, I was like, wow, I can't believe this is me. I'm designing a mail out for First Direct. I'm even if it was the smallest thing, like swapping the image over or changing the copy, I could say, yeah, I did that. Designing billboards, and yet again, I don't hold a single degree in graphic design. So, I just got here by building my portfolio and working with small businesses. So moving on from then, I then worked with a company, so worked with quite a few people, and we decided, let's actually create our own agency. And, at first it started off really well. I was the design director of that agency. And, we were doing really well. We was partnered with a media company that was helping us get customers. And of course, young people without, I would say, the right kind of mentorship and the right kind of leadership, but being fairly misguided, I think 2 years into the running of that agency, I began to receive quite a few complaints that from the media agency that we had partnered with, that they were not being paid. So photographers not being paid, videographers not being paid, freelancers not being paid. And I had no knowledge that they were not being paid because, of course, they haven't dealt directly with me. I was responsible for design. I was responsible for my brand identity clients. And at that point, I thought, okay, how do we navigate these issues with the fact that, the account manager is booking people to perhaps for a photo shoot in aid of the magazine company, and their photographers are not being paid? What do you do in that sense? Because of affiliation, you also get the grunt of it all. So I had to make a decision to eventually leave. And I had to leave because, number one, of my reputation, number two, integrity. And remaining is almost like your co-signing behavior, that I agree with what they're doing. Even if I'm like communicating, saying, hey, you need to pay this person, but if I choose to remain, it's almost like I'm co-signing that level of behavior. So I had to make that harsh decision to leave and almost kind of start again. I put my all into that agency because I really believe that we could become one of the few Black-led digital agencies within Britain. But because of these, I would say, financial discrepancies and these issues with integrity, I had to step away, which was, it was quite hard to begin with, but I understood that at that point, Sandra, you have to look at your belief system. What do you believe? What are your beliefs? What are your values? And if your values do not align with those who are around you, then you need to separate yourself so that you are not affected by their behavior. And at that point, it's not about loyalty, but it's about thinking about my future. So yeah, that's a part of my journey that I would say I've learned a huge lesson from, because, to have different people message me saying that they're being owed money and I have no knowledge of the fact that they were booked to do a job, it kind of made me think about what kind of team am I part of? There's no communication. And communication really helps alleviate these issues. So from, being part of running an agency, I also came on board and I worked at UAL as an associate lecturer on a master's program, which was amazing. It was an amazing experience for me to be able to pivot to become an educator, because a part of me has always loved educating young people, educating young designers and allowing them to see their potential. A lot of these designers that would approach me were designers of color, were international students. And for them, it was always about how do they navigate after they've left university, what do they do? And for me, it was about teaching them how to understand the process. And I think if we're going to change young people and their perceptions of life or their perceptions of the design industry, you can't make change unless you understand the world that you're in. So in order for me to understand the students, I have to get into their world. I have to understand what they're going through. I have to understand what's going through their mind. And a lot of them had this sort of fairy tale, dreamy sort of narrative of, once I leave university, I'm just gonna like dive right into a job. Some people do because perhaps maybe they're well connected, but for the latter, some of them weren't well connected. Some of them, are really struggling to even land a basic job, even to support them during their studies. And when you're in that situation, what do you actually tell a student like that? What do you actually say to them? So quite a few of them, I was able to help them secure an internship. But even after the internship, how do you land a role? So I think one of the hardest or most difficult roles of being perhaps a leader or a mentor is being able to keep someone in an encouraged position, that they have to keep trying, and giving them advice on what perhaps they need to do better. I think one of my mentorship moments, I think one of my mentees, and she was like, I feel like I'm not moving forward. And I said, well, I've given you instructions on what you need to do. We've identified your strengths. We've identified your weaknesses. I've presented opportunities for you, and you've not followed through. So we have to almost identify exactly what it is that you want to do. And you have to also understand that being an underdog, you need to really push through. You need to do what it takes to build a portfolio. My portfolio building phase, I was doing late nights. I was on like 5 different projects, passion projects, that sometimes I wasn't even paid for these projects, and at that point, it wasn't about, I mean, for me, yeah, the position I was in, like financial stability was very important, but I understood that my currency lied in my portfolio. That's where the currency was. And I understood how to trade services. And that allowed me to almost pivot and elevate myself to meet different people. But when you meet students or younger people that don't understand that process, and I'm not advocating for free work, I'm not saying people should work for free, but I think you should be able to understand and almost create a plan on how to almost elevate or how to pivot as a designer. If you're a young designer, you might want to put yourself out there, message a few small businesses and say, hey, I've just left university. This is my rate. I don't mind being your designer for £200 a month. That's between you and the small business, but you've put yourself out there. So you're not saying that you're going to work for free, but this is how much you're willing to work for. And I do the exact same thing. The same way in which I, said, hey, I don't have money to buy a ticket to this event, but I can design your logo. So you have to be bold. It's not all the time, especially once you've come out of university, that opportunity is going to land on your doorstep. There's thousands of graphic designers everywhere. There's Fiverr, there's different platforms where people are looking for designers. But if you want to remain at the cutting edge, you have to be bold. So I always tell my mentees that, this is what I've had to do, but it's all down to how much do you really want it. I mean, if you have, perhaps you may have a part-time job in Tesco and you're managing 3 passion projects, but you know that this is just for the moment. You know that this is not going to be your story for the rest of your life. You just know that I just need to do this to get my portfolio to where it needs, where I need it to be. So those are like the few sort of, I would say, lessons that I've learned, or, my encounters, kind of emerging into the design industry. And at the same time, I would say the disparities was that I wasn't part of any design communities or creative communities at the time. They're now as different. I've joined some communities because they're visible, but then coming up, there weren't diverse design communities, so that I can learn or find mentors. Even during the pandemic, I remember I emailed a lady and, for mentorship, and she didn't get back to me. So, it's interesting navigating. I always put it, navigating the leap from education into practice. It's an interesting one, especially, within the creative arts. It's not about, at that point, yes, there are racial disparities, but I feel like within the creative arts industry, there's always been this general consensus and general, phenomenon in regards to how do you actually land that creative role? How do you not become the starving artist? There's also nepotism as well. If you have family that are well connected within media, it may not be hard for you to land a role. So at that point, for me, even, eventually landing my first design agency role, it didn't really occur to me that I was the only Black female, because at that point, I didn't go in with the mindset of I'm the only Black person here. I went in the mindset of I just need to get this role. I need to get this role. I need to get in. I just need to get my foot in the door. Once I've gotten my foot in the door, I can help others, and I had mentees who were also creatives, and I brought 2 of them into the agency to have a look. And they were 2 young Black girls, and they were stunned. The agency was in Shoreditch, and they were so happy to be there. But I had to be there so that they can be there. So it was important for me to go through my journey, because if I haven't gone through my journey from being in McDonald's and from going from McDonald's to, whatever, and going back to college and then, going to uni and so forth, I wouldn't be able to pull in a whole load of other Black females who are looking to get into the graphic design industry. So it's understanding that there is a necessity for certain struggles and processes. And I think I became more community conscious when I began to think about the younger people around me, my community, the younger creatives. Then I began to assume responsibility. And at that point, it wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about my own success, but it was about what can I do to help the next one? How do I send the ladder down? Even if I don't feel like I am at the pinnacle, at the top of my career, I can always still make a difference, even if it's by connecting someone to another person. So yeah, that's pretty much my career story. And I think, currently right now, where am I? I still design. I'm a design director still, an educator. I'm currently doing my PhD, identifying the unique position of Black graphic designers in Britain. And of course, the Black Girls in Design organization. And do I have a roadmap of where I want to go, where I'm going to be? Essentially, it's really to be able to understand how to engage with policymakers on creating a better change within not just the creative industries, but within education, and understanding how can we diversify the curriculum, because in order to widen participation, we have to look at all the factors that affect barriers of entry. Yeah.
Wow. So many notes, just pages and pages of notes.
Oh wow.
That's why I have my head down. I'm just always. I love writing down points throughout things, and you have many, and it's amazing to hear.
Thank you.
All I can say is Prime Minister of the future. That's where we need to head towards, Sandra. Let's get you at the
Absolutely.
top of the chain and make it proper change. I'm conscious of time.
Yeah, I know. I've been rambling on.
Well, we're trying to squeeze a lot in the short amount
Yeah,
of time. And obviously, hopefully, that was essential on Monday when we were speaking about the community. We can continue to have wider conversations in the future. You know, this opens up a lot of
of
doors
course.
about how we can raise awareness of this stuff. I think going back to family, do you think that in those earlier days,
Yeah,
say early days, it's not like you're not especially old, but you know, in your sort of say college, sort of end of your teenage, early adulthood, because of family expectations and maybe cultural expectations, it was just
yeah,
this. Like I was saying to you earlier about the girl that was South Asian, that there's a consistency in that
yes,
expectation level to do certain things. And I understand it because I think it's a want for your children to do better than you
yeah,
because you have got opportunity. But that doesn't always apply to everybody. People have their own desire to go in different directions.
exactly.
Do you think that that pressure sort of then spurred you on to then do? We talk about things like McDonald's and college and then going into industry. You know, they're like for that age, they're really sort of go-getter attitude. You know, that's a real sort of
Yeah,
I'm going to show them that I can. Was there some of that in there that that desire to actually
absolutely.
prove people wrong?
Yes. And thank you for raising that because I began to become, I saw myself becoming an overachiever. I had to do this to prove to people that yes, I may have had my daughter young, but look at me now. You know, this look at me now approach. You know, I remember I got my driver's license at like 17. I was like, yeah, look at me now. I've got my driver's license, you know. So I got into a space that I felt like I needed to keep proving people that keep proving people wrong so that they can perhaps change how they think, what they think about me, or maybe I cared about what people thought too much because of perhaps maybe certain down moments in my life. So I felt like I needed to kind of really pick myself up and constantly, you know, show the opposite to what people might think, or maybe how they felt I might turn out. But the turning point for me was it's not about what they think, but it's about becoming someone who has transformed and becoming an example, almost like a billboard of progress to the next generation. That's who matter. It's not about people in your past, but it's about the future. It's about being able to raise yourself to a position in which people can look to, people can refer to in the archives of history that there was a Sandra Adu that she fought for this and you know she was able to do this and she's written research on this and you know it began to be about not about my family anymore, but about the millions of young black females, young black males, or you know any you know one in design or within the creative industries that they can actually watch me from afar and say, hey, if she can do it, then I can. So as soon as that kind of overachieving aspect kind of left my mind and me feeling I need to make my parents proud, then I think I became more community conscious, and that it was not about me, but it's about the young girl that may not have parents at all. It's about that young boy that doesn't have that support system. I can become his support system. So yeah,
Amazing. I think it becomes a real beacon of hope for so many.
absolutely.
See others and it's not like we say this or do this for praise, but it's sort of sacrificing what you
Absolutely.
could probably just sort of happily build a very nice, successful
Yeah,
career in design and sail off into the background and do your bit. But it goes beyond that. You know, I think certain people have a calling to then say, "Well, I'm going to put my neck on the line to make a change," and be fine with
exactly.
that. You know? And probably get quite a lot of people saying negative things as well as positive things. But
Of course, always, always.
I suppose that's just there in general, isn't it? People like to sort of shoot people down, unfortunately. There was a part of this, and I've written some sub notes. I've got used to this writing notes as I go along. It's become
Well
sort of
done.
second nature. But you know, I've got things like the lineage of what you said, but then there's also always certain phrases or words that pop up that seem to
Yeah.
that you don't say, but they seem to indicate these things. And a few of them are tenacious, proactive, and imaginative. So the idea of doing the work for the ticket is not having a career in design, but pivoting and understanding it in a relatively short period of time. And I think about myself, just bumbling along, doing the same thing all your life, to be able
Yeah.
to, and even like having a child, etc., etc. They're all characteristics of hard work, a work ethic, that sort of culture of overcoming things
Yes.
others
Yeah.
might not. You probably don't see that, but that in yourself, and that can sound a bit weird if you sort of talk about yourself in those sort of descriptive
Yes.
ways. But do you think that there's something in, and this is quite a big question, and probably will need more time to think and answer it, but that there's a current generation that have been so exposed through social media and online use that are maybe a little bit fragile, that don't have some of those characteristics, and they need to be really helped in the right direction and be led more than just sort of say, here's an opportunity. You have to really sort of take them to the water, so to speak.
I definitely agree. I think if I compare the current generation to like my time, there's a huge difference. I remember when I had my first job in McDonald's, a group of us, quite a lot of us, applied for McDonald's. Like there was a time where everybody had McDonald's jobs. People were working in KFC, JD Sports, just doing the basic retail role. And at that point, everyone knew that this isn't our like lifetime role, but we understand that we need income, and this is the best place to work for us at this point. And at that point there wasn't Instagram then. There wasn't Instagram. There was of course Pixo and Bebo, and MSN. Yeah. But during the summer it was like, yeah, we're working in McDonald's, and after work, then yeah, we might go out and have a good time. But we all understood. I think that work ethic then was different to what we see now. I feel like social media has made a lot of people lazy, has made perhaps designers think, I'm just going to go online and just throw my work on there, and I'm just going to expect people to just hire me. No, you might need to actually go ahead and be bold and, forge some relationships. You might have to be bold and message that small business and say, hey, this is what I think is not working for your brand. I've just come out of university. Let's have a conversation. I think I can help you. A lot of young people are they are bold to an extent because they're not willing to kind of put in the hard work. They're expecting to just be paid. Hence why I still think internships are slightly undervalued, and now they're kind of under attack, especially unpaid internships. But it's all about process. And because everything is now fast-paced, social media's fast-paced, technology's fast-paced, it's almost like we're now in a microwave generation where nobody really wants to put in that much work, and they expect to be paid thousands of pounds for minimal effort. I'm not trying to say that you should sweep the floor and, do all of those different kinds of duties. But I think it's about understanding process, understanding why you're in this position, understanding why you need to put in this level of work, understanding that there are certain mistakes I'll rather make now at this level and then encounter a mistake at a greater level. For example, the amount of spelling mistakes I used to make on flyers years ago. I'm not a copywriter, but it doesn't mean I couldn't develop an eye to be able to identify that there's a spelling mistake here. Imagine making a spelling mistake at a greater level. So if I didn't go through these internships and working with small businesses, you end up working for Coca-Cola and there's an advert out and there's a spelling mistake. So it's understanding process is about refinement. It's about, I'm being refined right now so that I can become the best. But a lot of young people nowadays, or the generation now, have this very few of them have this mindset of process and being refined. They see it as, oh no, you're just stopping me from becoming the best. No, we're not stopping you from becoming the best. We're stopping you from embarrassing yourself. We're stopping you from, almost making this huge mistake on a £2.3 million campaign. You know what I mean? And it's all your fault. You know, the designer gets the grunt. They bear the grunt. Oh, it's your fault. It's your fault. Why didn't you see the spelling mistake? Oh, couldn't you see that the copy was wrong? So it's all about refinement. How can I be refined to even pick out the details that it may not be your role, but it's about taking responsibility. It's about even though I'm not the copywriter, I can still identify that there's a mistake. It's not just about, well, I'm just here to design. It's about being able to take responsibility for the job, you know, for the actual, you know, the creative role. That this is my role, and I'm able to also identify the areas that need to change. Is almost these refinement and processes helps you to become a well-rounded leader. So we're not constantly spoon feeding you, but the process has refined you to a place that you become more responsible. So yeah, I don't know if there's anybody now that would design a logo for a ticket.
Yeah, yeah. We hope there might be somebody out there that's still got that
That
steam.
hunger. Yeah, I mean, there's a very few interns that I meet. You know, there's one young girl I met. She was my intern, and she helped build the Black Girls in Design Instagram. And she had that hunger and that tenacity. And I was like, wow. I said to her, do you know what? If you keep at it, you're going to be an amazing designer. I don't have any doubt for your creative, you know, potential or future, because she just got on with it. She took ownership of the project. She was sending me stuff like, oh, I think we should post this or what. And I'm like, oh wow, you know, like, you're amazing. She's a great, amazing girl. She was an international student from Nigeria. But I always say, yeah, everyone's hunger is different. And I think there's a level of hunger that needs to be kindled, you know, that fire in one's heart that just makes you want to just become the best, even if you're not getting paid £50 an hour. You know, you just know that, hey, I just love design. I love, you know, creating things. I love people just looking at, you know, flyers or like whatever magazines, and they're just in awe. You just love people having a great experience. So I always said, as a designer, you have to be a lover of people. You have to have an understanding of what people need, because it's about them. The design is about how people will interact, whether it's a product or, you know, whether it's whether it's an advert or a magazine. It's about their interaction, their experience. So when you move away from the experiences of people, you know, what they need to face or what they need to encounter, and it becomes more about you, then that's when the desire and the passion it kind of dwindles, because you're so focused on your own self-satisfaction. I remember there was like one intern that I had, and you know, we're halfway through the project and she said, am I going to be credited for the illustration? And I'm just like, oh my God. At that point, I was like, what world are we in?
Yeah.
Let's talk about whether you're going to be credited once everything's done and it's been signed off.
Yeah.
You're asking, am I going to be credited for the illustration halfway through the project? There was so much ego, I had to remove her from the project because her ego got in the way so much that I couldn't instruct her anymore. I couldn't correct her. She was so much in her own mind and in her own head, and she obviously must think she's the best, that she's asking if she's going to be credited for something that hasn't even been signed off yet.
Yeah, I think there's, we've mentioned this before, I'm sure, when we've spoken in the past, but everything seems to revolve around education. And
Yeah.
I think education needs to move itself fast ahead of what's going on, as opposed to seeming to be way behind and just stuck in the practical skill sort of mindset.
Yeah.
There's so many more fields it needs to get into, and that's not the reality of the industry. That is bridging that gap. That is sort of the, you know, policing what goes on in some sort of shape or form and helping
exactly
students get in line and in touch with what we face on a day-to-day basis, and all of the different challenges and issues of individual communities as well as the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
And needs to be much more reform, but that's where people like you come in and you can lead change and create alternatives to that, because I think, you know, I don't think that old system or an old institutional education wants to change. It's happy to on doing its own thing, making lots of money, isn't it? So why change something that's already
exactly
making
Because for
lots of.
them, it's about recruiting students onto the course, you
Yeah,
know,
that's it. Yeah,
and hitting their
got key
targets. That's a
shareholders.
cohort.
Yeah, they've got people at the top, haven't they, that are financially benefiting them. Why would they want to change that?
Exactly.
That tends to traditionally
Exactly.
be the old stuffy white man.
Yeah.
Ironically,
Yeah.
they're the ones that hold the key that we need to really target. Ironically, someone told me this the other day. They said we seem to be
Yeah.
aiming a lot of anger at those people, but they're the ones that can help us change it, which is quite unfortunate, but true.
Exactly.
But Sandra, I really, really appreciate your time again. That's gone so
Same here.
fast.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for
I
having
think
me.
we could go on and on and on, couldn't we? And we will do in
We
future.
can, clearly.
I'm sure there'll be a lot more of these to come. And I've got something else I want to email you, but I'm going to
Okay.
leave.
Yeah. Cool.
It's
You just
really,
send it through.
it really was inspired by what you said on Monday. So it's
Okay. Thank you.
yeah, it could be, if we can get it to work, something that could be quite interesting.
Okay. Lovely.
Until then, I'll leave you be, and
Thank you so much.
look forward to catching up in future.
Yes. Take care. Thank
Take care,
you.
Andrew. See you soon.